Hello, everyone. Today we are looking at a great game between the late great international master Emory Tate with the white pieces, and with the black pieces, we have a renowned commentator in the first black grandmaster, Maurice Ashley. Okay, this game took place at the New York Open Round 9 in 1993, so both players were at the time uh, rated around the mid 2300s. Um, both FIDE masters at the time, and there was still a question up in the air about who was going to be the first black grandmaster. Would it be Maurice Ashley? Would it be Emory Tate? Would it be William the Exterminator Morrison? Right? Um, there were a few uh, strong black players at the time that were around 23, 2400. Uh, and who was it going to be? Right? Emory Tate passed away in 2015. Who was Emory Tate? Emory Tate, uh, according to many people, definitely uh, could have been a grand master. Um, he became an international master. His results varied greatly. He would uh, destroy grandmasters. If you go on chessgames.com and look up some of Emory Tate's greatest games, some games are just phenomenal. He was a awesome tactician, very exciting player to watch. He would take a lot of chances and a lot of risk. And usually, players with this style will have results that vary greatly because they're taking so many chances. So either they're going to scalp a GM or they're going to be a victim of a miniature. Another international master like this that comes to mind was Cameron Shirazi. Same way as Emory Tate would destroy a good strong grandmaster, but then would lose to somebody that was like 2200 uh, in the tournament. So Maurice did go on, as you know, to become the first black grandmaster, if you will, and I think it's just because of his consistency and playing style. Of course, Maurice could um, play tactically with anyone, but he had a more consistent, more even keeled, balanced approach. Very good end game player also, and I think it's these qualities of being consistent, okay, and just being more balanced overall in all phases of the game, middle game, opening, and end game, uh, that allowed him to finally reach that goal of becoming the Grandmaster. So we're gonna look at this game again from New York Open, 1993, as we step out of our time machine. Emory Tate, the white pieces began with E4. Maurice C5, playing the Sicilian at the time. Knight of 3, D6, D4, open Sicilian. Knight takes D4. Knight F6, Knight C3, Knight C6. And we wind up in this Richter-Rauzer attack. Very popular attacking system in the Sicilian, especially in the 90s. Very aggressive play by White. A straightforward plan. As you can see, the way the pieces are set up is to play moves like Queen D2, Castle Queenside. Play moves like F3, followed by pawn attack on the king side with G4, H4. Sometimes F4, G4, H4, G5 are played um, with very aggressive and nasty intentions. E6, Queen D2, A6, Castle, H6, Bishop E3, Queen C7. So we see black, uh, very solid position as you have in Sicilian, preparing his counterplay on the queen side, and utilizing his pawn preponderance in the center with these E and D pawns in order to make sure that it is not easy for white to utilize a space advantage in the center. All right, this is one of the keys to the Sicilian defense. Besides having the open C file to wage a counterattack, it's this pawn preponderance in the center that keeps white from being able to use these vital squares that is so important in conducting attacks. Rook b8, preparing the kingside counter assault, and g4. Knight e5, common theme in the Sicilian, so all looks normal so far. Normally we see these kind of ideas with knight e5 going to c4, basically forcing white to give up the bishop here. Here, another normal idea is just continuing with h4 also for white. b5, a3 for example, knight of d7, king b1, and bishop e7. And these are the type of games that you will see often in this variation. However, back to the game, after knight e5, Emory Tate plays the enterprising move f4, sacrificing a pawn, and basically he wants to blast open the position and try to exploit the fact that black's king is still uncommitted and in the middle of the board, as well as having a lead in development. So after f4, knight e takes g4, bishop g1, and here Maurice makes a mistake as far as I'm concerned in playing e5, because this allows white to open up the position here. Instead of e5, maybe just continuing along with b5 here, continuing his attack on the queen side, right, still maintaining closure in the position, or even a move like knight d7 here, clearing the f6 square for the other knight that's on g4 to return. After e5, notice that this knight here on g4 is trapped, and Tate could have just simply played h3, and after e takes d4, he could just capture bishop d4, because still this knight doesn't have a safe place to return. Let's say queen a5, h takes, bishop e2, and you can see black's development is not too good, and the position is ready to burst wide open. Play can continue, bishop e6 for example, a3, rook c8, and king b1. And I like white's position here with the open files, isolated pawn, and good piece coordination here. So after e5, instead of playing h3, Emory Tate put his feet on the gas pedal, and he plays bishop b5 check. Okay, and this is indicative of Emory Tate's style of play, just simply throwing the kitchen sink here at Maurice. Now, it looks like a silly move at face value because the knight is on prise here on d4, and now he's just simply seeming to give away another piece. Well, in actuality, he's not, because he realizes that this knight here on g4 is trapped. So basically what Tate wants to do, instead of just giving this knight on d4 and say capturing this piece right here, what he's doing, he's making a trade. Instead of giving up this knight, he's saying, hey, I'm going to give up this bishop instead. All right, and gain tempi on the queen here after the capture here. Right, so basically he's accelerating his development by giving up a piece that he doesn't want. Okay, so he's moving this piece off the back rank, developing it, and then taking this piece and placing it here. So he figures if he's gonna give up a piece, he might as well get something out of it. So what happens is a takes b5, knight d takes b5, so there it is, and now Maurice goes to d8. And now this move is kind of passive here. I'm always reminded when it's time to make a defensive move. I'm always reminded of something attributed to the former world champion Emmanuel Lasker, who said in his handbook on chess, um, to paraphrase, that basically when you do have to make a defensive move, try to have some poison to it. What do I mean by that? Try to make a defensive move that is also attacking. All right, not just a purely defensive move. If you don't have to, and in this case, Maurice doesn't have to make a purely defensive move as he did here with Queen D8. Okay, he could have played a move like Queen C6, which still keeps the pressure on the E4 pawn. So you still have ideas here. So play, for instance, after Queen C6 can go H3. So here's black, white cashing in here, getting this piece that's trapped. For example, Rook A8, going to the open file. Knight takes, bishop takes, queens are off the board. And this is just a sample line. And we can see here that with the queens off and black being castled, and we can see here that black here is better in spite of white's better piece coordination, which is only going to be temporary, as black will have no problems now unraveling his position. So Queen C6 is a little more enterprising. If not Queen C6, maybe a move like even Queen D7 might be a little better, but I only see that with the purpose of coming to Queen C6. Queen D8 is just a pure defensive move, which gives white nothing to think about. Emory Tate plays Bishop C5, again exploiting the fact that now the pawn cannot capture the bishop, and again development. Okay, Tate definitely has this old school style, like this Morphy style. You would think this game, he was from the 1800s and playing in the 1990s, right? This style of just this all out assault with the pieces. All right, and it works here, and he definitely has compensation because of the lack of development. All right, he forced Maurice's queen to go back to its original square, and now the rook on b8 is very passive at this point. So, his attacking style definitely seems to taking Maurice aback somewhat. Again, instead of bishop c5, he can always cash in on h3. Remember, this knight is still boxed in somewhat here. And this might be a little more sound. So let's say b6 with the idea of getting this guy out. f5, bishop a6, queen e2. Takes, queen d7. Again, this is a sample continuation. Bishop e7. And finally cashing in. And here we can see that now white is a bit better here in this position. Okay, the pawn structure favors white, even though he's a pawn down, and also his piece activity, and also strong squares on d5 here. If the knight returns to f6, then just queen g7. So h5 is probably forced here, and then that allows knight d5. Instead, Tate kept his foot on the gas pedal and played bishop c5 and attacking this pawn again. So this pawn is attacked 4 times, and Maurice pretty much has to move this pawn. He plays d5. Now bishop a7, just continuing to attack. Rook a8, and now Tate makes a mistake here, almost like an egregious error, because this spoils the attack here. he plays knight takes d5 here, which forces the queens off, and this helps black, right? Black being without development, the position opening up, and all of a sudden, uh, this allows black some relief. So knight takes d5 from Ashley, and queen takes d5. And now you might be saying, well, why queen takes d5? He doesn't want to trade queens, right? He doesn't. He doesn't want to trade queens. The problem here is that if he plays e takes d5, then after a simple move like bishop d7 attacking this knight, then white is going to lose material because now the bishop is threatened and the knight is threatened at the same time. So for instance, knight c3, rook takes a7, f takes e5, uh, bishop takes b5. All right, so white's hands are tied pretty much as far as a response here. Okay, he could try to play a move like queen e2, right, exploiting this pin of the of this rook here, and then you can have rook takes a7 here, knight takes a7 followed by queen to b6. Okay, and you have a move like knight takes c8, but then you have queen e3. Rook takes d5 instead. Now you just move the bishop this time. And then it'll be white who's forced to trade again. And although black's play has been enterprising, white's play has been enterprising here, it's just not enough compensation for the material deficit. Okay, so play can continue. E takes f4, rook takes b7, for example, and then maybe a move like knight e3, or even bishop a2 might be possible. I don't think so though. G5. So if the knight takes d5, queen d5 was forced, and that's what Tate had to play. Let me show you what he should have played though here. Rook. So let's go back. So instead of knight takes d5, f takes e5, just opening up the position and keeping the queens on board. Okay, and let's look at a few variations here. So first variation is of course the obvious one, knight takes e5. Now knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and it's a different story here. Queen takes, rook takes with tempo here, bishop e6. So you might be wondering, well, why leave the rook here, the knight here like that, right? If he, let's say he comes back here, knight c7, check, just winning the rook. So after rook d5, just bishop e6, and of course you give up the knight to save the rook. And we can see here that white is just simply winning after that continuation there. So after f takes e5, the other variation, instead of just the obvious capture here, is rook takes. And that's just meant by e takes f6 then. Rook a5. And queen f4. And you can see the pin on the d file. And notice again, we see the activity of the swarming white pieces here. Much better than what we saw in the game. So f takes e5 is definitely the move. I'm not gonna say winning move, but white definitely has the upper hand here. So Tate's opening has paid off. The chances that the aggressiveness in the opening has paid off. And one more variation, just want to dismiss the move e takes d5. So f takes e5 is like our big continuation that should have been played. But if e takes d5, then same thing, just rook takes, knight takes, and now bishop c5 is very strong because you have this threat right here of bishop e3 with the queen and king lined up. So rook he1, and then of course you just drop the bishop. Drop the piece on a7. Of course, if knight ab5 is trying to save it, bishop e3. So this is why this move e takes d5 is no good. The difference here with f takes e5, rook takes a7, is that here the threat is easily parried. You would just capture here, f takes g7, and here it just doesn't work, of course. Okay, so back to the game. Again, one more time, f takes e5 is the move that needed to be played. So knight takes d5 was captured, was played. Knight takes and queen takes. Remember I told you that queen takes was pretty much forced here. This allows Maurice to alleviate the pressure in the position. So queen takes d5, knight c7 check, king d7, knight takes a8 grabbing the rook. And now Maurice plays some really nice defense here. He plays queen d6. He's not helping white develop at all. Of course, he could have played a move like queen d1, but this would have brought the other rook to the d file, and then perhaps a move like king c6 and been fine. But I like his mentality here. Right? He's going to play queen d6. He's going to say, hey, you want the queen, you help me develop. All right? Bishop b8. Again, Tate is trying to force Maurice to make the exchange. He says, nope. Plays queen c6. This forces, now that the king is out of the pen, this forces Tate to make the exchange, which he didn't want to. And now black gets to develop on Tate's time. So bishop takes d6, bishop takes d6, rook d3, preparing to double up on the d file, obviously. And now b5 with the idea of playing the bishop here to b7. Rook hd1, bishop c5, of course avoiding the capture of the bishop, but still guarding the square. And now rook d8, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, bishop b7, finally h3, and now knight f2. At this point, we could say that black is now winning the game. He has several ways. He played knight f2 in the game. He could even went for e takes f4 and just give up the knight. F3, for example, rook d5, f2. And that's just too much firepower for white to withstand. So e takes f4, possible, simply bishop e3. Again, Maurice would just have an avalanche of pawns. But he chose knight f2, which is also a good move. So right now, we can say that black is winning the game. But like they say, there's nothing harder to win than the one game. So f takes e5. It's played by Tate. He continues on. Knight takes h3 by Maurice. c3. Knight f2. b4 by Tate, bishop e7, rook b8, and bishop g5 check by Maurice. Of course, he could have just captured the knight too on a8. And now here, things get a little murky here. And I guess too, he figured there's no rush to capture this knight here. But things get a bit murky after bishop g5. So king c2. Maurice starts pushing his pawn. After all, I mean, it looks basically unstoppable, these pawns on the G and H files. a4 by Tate. Maurice simplifies. Bishop takes a8. A takes b5 check. And this was kind of like, almost like an oversight by Maurice here. Instead of playing h5, he should have captured first on a8 by playing bishop takes a8. And then perhaps move like knight takes e4. Instead he plays h5 here, and Tate plays a4. And the idea here is if Maurice falls asleep on the job and plays bishop takes b takes a4, then b5 check. This forces the king to be driven away from the defense of the bishop on b7. So he has to go there, for example, and then just like that, he's lost. So that's why I was saying this move is a little suspect and allows this tactic of a4. So now after bishop takes a8, you don't see an automatic capture here by Tate, but he captures the pawn first. A takes b5. He plays king d7. And so basically he just lost a pawn here for nothing. So now we have this interesting position where you have knight and bishop and 3 pawns versus a rook and 5 pawns. All right. So the game is definitely up for grabs here. So Maurice plays bishop f4, and here Tate plays the move rook f8, just getting behind the pawn and starts attacking again. King e7. Rook h8, again attacking. Notice how Tate constantly fights for initiative here. And just h4 by Ashley. If he plays g6 just to protect it, then simply b6. With this, the idea of this rook being on the back rank like this is, of course, to aid these pawns up the board and eventually force black to give up a piece to defend it from queening. h4. Rook takes h4. Now g5, and Tate simply goes back to the 8th rank, again with the idea of just escorting this pawn up the board. Another idea is to play rook h5 to prevent this move, bishop takes e5. So sample variation again, knight takes e4 could be played here, then b6, bishop takes e5, b7, and let's say king d7 for example. Rook h7, king e7, and then you start pushing the other pawns. c3. And at this point, of course, white would be winning. It's just a sample variation of what's possible there, and what the idea is of having the rook here on the 8th rank. So instead, rook h8 is played, bishop takes e5, rook g8. So similar ideas, getting behind the pawn, but thing is, white has dropped some material here. So f6, And now b6, and this plan is very simple. b7, b8 queen, bishop takes b8, rook takes b8, and win the game. Tate plays king f7, and now rook a8, again with the same idea. All right. Maurice plays g4, and he figures, hey, I have to get my counterplay going. This move g4 intimidates Tate somewhat, and he begins to play passively, and he gives up his good rook position on the back rank and brings it to rook to a1. Perhaps better is maybe a move like king d2 here. Even though you're giving up this check, this allows you to come closer with the to be within the square of the pawn to be able to stop this pawn from promoting with your king. That way you leave your rook in its good position at the same time. So for example, knight c3, b7, here g3. Again, maintaining the proximity to the pawn, knight d5, king f3 here, and finally here, d5. Okay, is that enough for white to win? Probably not, but that's probably the best play at this point. Instead, Tate comes to a1 with the rook. So now he kind of loses some ability to threaten with this promotion. Meanwhile, Maurice continues g3, and notice with the king far away, the king can't participate in the defense here, and neither is the king participating in really promoting these pawns. He's just kind of watching this c pawn. So the rook is doing all of the work. First, the rook is trying to help promote up here, right, to start this record label, to promote these pawns, and now the rook is forced to come back to defend here. Rook g1. This is good for black. Knight takes e4. He has a lot of counterplay, and now the pawns start to move. However, with no pieces around to assist them, they're a little bit easier to stop. King e6, king d3, and now f5. King e3. Okay, by Tate, which is a mistake at this point, right? Because what good is king e3? After all, his best bet is to push his own pawns. All right, at this point, his king is close enough to stop the threats, right? So he should be trying to promote these pawns. Without the rook being on the 8th rank, now he can't just push b7, b8. He has to push these pawns all the way up, and they have to help each other. And so good play by Maurice in creating enough of a threat, even though it was kind of a bluff, where he was able to get the great tactician Emory Tate to give up an aggressive rook positioning on the 8th rank to bring this rook back to a1 and switch it over to a purely passive defensive position on g1. At this point, Tate plays king e3. And again, better would be a move like c5. So for example, king d5, rook c1, king c6, of course, trying to stop the pawns, rook e1, bishop to c3, rook b1, g2, king e3, bishop takes b4, b7. And of course, not king takes b7 because of rook takes b4. Although with this dangerous pawn here, the rook really has no good options but either to come back to b1 or to go to b6 check and then try to come over here. So after B, C5, bishop takes C5 check, king F3, queen, rook takes G1. And again, black still will have to stay on his toes because if he took the rook, then he would allow the queen. This is why bishop D6 would have to be played there. Rook G7, bishop C7, king E3, and then now king takes B7, rook F7, and knight G3. So black is slightly better here, and does have some slight winning chances here. Okay, even after C5, which is a little bit better. Instead, king E3 was played, and now Maurice just prepares to advance the F pawn. So first, he can't move the F pawn because the knight on E4 would just be captured. So he plays knight G5 with that in mind. And now C5, again, a little bit too late, right? Highlighting the error of king E3 and F4. And not only was king E3 wrong and slow, but it put the king, it allowed black to play F4 with tempo. Now Tate goes back to where he was before, and so black was able to gain all of this time here. So F3, and black is clearly winning here. So it looks like Maurice Ashley is going to be the winner, right? In the meeting and clash of the Titans here. Rook E1 by Emory Tate. Just back up against the wall. And now, all right, one of these pawns has to be pushed by black. And if you want, you can pause the video and figure out what the winning continuation should be here for black. But Maurice played the move F2 in this position. And surprisingly enough, this does not win. This actually allows an amazing draw opportunity for Emory Tate here in this position. Okay, and I'll show you why in a second after I show you the finish of the game. So rook takes E5 by Tate. King takes E5. King E2. So of course now the pawn can't be pushed. Knight F3, of course the knight can't be captured. However, B7, the king is far away from the queening square, so he has no choice but to promote one of these pawns. So knight D4 check, king F1, and there's nothing that black can do in time except go back to C6, which makes the knight passive to stop this. And now B5. So now the knight is threatened. Knight B8. C6 from Tate. And this forces king D6. And the players agreed upon a draw as the king, black king, and the knight are paralyzed. And all Tate has to do is shuffle back and forth between F1 and G2. So what a barn burner. But before I close, let's look at the winning continuation here. So again, on move 51, Maurice played F2, and I said it was the wrong pawn. The reason why it's the wrong pawn is because if he moves G2, then the sacrifice doesn't work. Rook takes E5. King takes E5, and notice in this variation, since F2 has not been played, King E2 is not available. And notice that this pawn is one square away from queen. There's no way to stop this pawn, right? Even if he's here, it's too late. So all he can do is play B7. The queen must appear on the board, and even with check, just simply king f5, queen f8, king g4, queen c8. There'll be a few checks, but eventually black's extra piece is going to prove to be too much. And also, he'll probably wind up queening that other pawn. But this right here is clearly winning for black as the checks run out. All black can do really at this, white can do at this point is play a move like queen c6 to prevent uh, f2 from being played. And what happens here is that now black is able to consolidate his position even more by checks either on D, beginning at D1 or B1, etc. And again, the knight and queen combination will win. Okay, so just missing the right move by just picking the wrong pawn. Maybe he was in time trouble, or maybe he just misevaluated. Well, he definitely misevaluated, but perhaps it was because he was in time trouble. But yes, f2, again, after rook takes e5, king takes e5, allows king e2. And notice now the pawns become crippled. But if you just switch it, and now it's a totally different scenario. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that game. That was a game that I thoroughly enjoyed analyzing. Um, uh, Going over that game, made me think about Emory Tate and how excited I would get to see his games because I know that win or lose, something exciting was going to happen over the chessboard, and it was definitely an exciting game watching both of these players as FIDE Masters playing in the New York Open. So thank you for your time and listening to this video. And hey, I'll see you guys on the next video. Check out all my other videos that I have. I have about 500 videos on all types of different subjects on chess, different openings. I have compilation videos where I just go through one opening, whether it's the birds, uh, Trumpowski. I have offbeat opening videos, like for instance Alexander Morozevich versus, the Albin counter gambit according to Alexander Morozevich, where I go through all of Alexander Morozevich's games with just playing the black side of the Albin counter gambit. I do the same thing with the Shigorin defense, Alexander Morozevich, the Shigorin according to Alexander Morozevich. Um, what else? Martial defense according to Levon Aronian, where I just go through all of his martial defense games. So there's a little bit of something for everyone on this channel. So like I said, end games too. If you want to just get into end games, I have all types of end game material, middle game material. I have videos on how to analyze a position. Many videos like that where I break down the actual system of how grandmasters actually analyze positions, right? When there's particularly no tactics on the board, like how do you make a plan in chess? All right, all that stuff is on this channel. So please click my links below. Please subscribe, like, right? That helps bring more views um, to my channel by raising, the viewership. Um, it will cause YouTube, the robots, if you will, the artificial intelligence to promote my video more. And also, please donate to my channel down in the links below. And I'll see you guys on the next video.